If you were forced to play a real-life game of Among Us where everyone is trying to kill you, what would you do? I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the imposter death game in Werewolf game Crazy Fox. This girl will have to kill the man she loves in order to stay alive. Ayaka here wakes up on the floor next to her high school crush, when suddenly a TV in the corner of the room turns itself on. 10 other students begin to wake up as they all start to realize they've been kidnapped and have no idea where they are. Getting up off the floor, they take a closer look at the TV and find a message telling them they must now play a werewolf game. The TV tells them that they're going to be split into teams. 3 of these students will act as werewolves, who are the most savage of them all, and their goal is to kill all of the other players. 8 students will act as regular villagers, and their goal is to find who the werewolves are and vote to brutally kill them. Lastly, there's a new role card called the Fox. One student will get this special role, and if the Fox survives to the end, they win the game while everyone else dies. The students are terrified and can't believe what they're hearing. They are only a bunch of high schoolers who can barely be trusted to finish their homework, let alone kill people. But Kodai here yells that they're wasting time and should be thinking about how to escape. That's when this kid reaches up to find a strange collar around his neck, and everyone panics as they realize they all have one too. It's clear they have no choice but to play this game if they want to survive. The TV gives them 2 main rules. Every night, they must gather in this room to vote on who they think the wolf is, and whoever gets the most votes will be executed. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., the villagers must stay in their rooms while the werewolves come out and choose one villager to kill, but if they don't successfully kill someone, all the werewolves will die. This is a horrifying scenario, and all the players check their role card to see which team they're on, but when Ayaka here looks at her card, she discovers she's the Fox. This girl is alone against the 11 other students who can only win if they kill her, and she will have to do the most cold-blooded things to stay alive. Okay, this is really intense, and if I woke up in a death game like this, the first thing I'd be thinking is how similar it is to Among Us, where there's an imposter secretly hunting down crewmates, and the crewmates are trying to find who the imposter is. But when playing a game like this in real life means you actually have to murder your friends, it makes all the difference in the world. We need to start strategizing immediately if you want to survive this, and luckily, there's already a huge advantage here if you know where to look. Now, death games are just too scary to keep a good poker face, and unlike Among Us, this game lets us see everyone's expressions to tell what they might be hiding. If someone got a bad roll card that puts their lives at greater risk, they're probably going to look upset. That's why as soon as everyone takes out their cards, I would be looking at everyone's faces to gauge their reactions. For example, this guy looks depressed, and this guy looks shocked. It's not a dead giveaway for what roles they have, but it's still good information for us to use later on, because it's a completely unguarded moment that we can learn a lot from. And if we can match a bad reaction to a card with suspicious behavior later in the game, it gives us reason to think that they might be a werewolf. Now, our main character in this game is the Fox, and as the Fox, we have a very unique situation. If we are still alive when either team wins, then we automatically become the sole winners of the game, and all the surviving players die on the spot. That's why it's awesome, because the other teams do the winning for you, as long as we don't get discovered. This is the only role in the game that allows us to play both sides to help the leading team win, because if anyone finds out we're the Fox, they'll kill us immediately. If we figure out who the werewolves are and they're in the lead, then I'd pretend to be a stupid villager that's convinced by their lies and help them manipulate the other players. The wolves will keep you alive because you're defending them, and if we keep doing this without drawing suspicion, it's the fastest path to a Fox victory. Now, this might sound two-faced, and that's because it totally is. But I'll be damned if we don't do whatever it takes to survive this death game, even if it means 11 other people have to die for me as a result. Later that day, the Fox Ayaka finds some privacy to think about everything that's happened. Suddenly, her friend Ozawa joins her, and the Fox asks if she believes in love at first sight. But the other girl is shocked. She shouldn't be thinking about love when they're stuck in a death game like this, and it makes her look suspicious. That's when they hear shouting in the distance. Worried, the girls run into the voting room where they find these 2 students getting into a fight. This angry kid tried to go outside to look for a way to escape, but the other kid stopped him, and Kodai here is furious. He refuses to participate in this death game, but the other kid thinks he's reacting this way because he might beat the werewolf. Nobody trusts each other, and one student suggests they talk this out before it goes too far. They all sit down in a circle, and the skater here reminds everyone that among the villagers, there are 3 special cards. The seer can pick one player each night and discover if that person is a villager or a werewolf. The bodyguard can protect one person each night from getting killed by the werewolves, but not himself, and the medium can see if any dead player is a villager or a werewolf. That's when the skater comes up with a plan. He suggests that whoever has the seer card should confess their identity to the group so that the villagers don't mistake him for a werewolf and kill him. Once they know who he is, the bodyguard can make sure the seer survives by protecting him each night. It's a risky strategy, but the seer is the only person who can confirm who the werewolves are, and the villagers need this ability if they want to win the game. He asks the seer to raise his hand on the count of 3, but to everyone's surprise, the fox Ayaka and 3 other players raise their hands. No one knows who to trust, but the skater boy has set them all up. He knew that the fox and a werewolf might pretend to be the seer to hide their roles from the other players, and now they've all painted targets on their backs. It was a stroke of genius, but suddenly this kid Shiki reveals that he's the real seer and everyone else is lying. The boy tells the group he can prove his identity, but only on one condition. Tomorrow morning, anyone claiming to be a seer must announce a role they discovered, and the group can use this information to figure out who's telling the truth based on whether their predictions are accurate. Okay, this was a fine display of stupidity. As the fox, Ayaka here can't let anyone know her true identity, but it would have been much smarter for her to have lied that she was a villager instead. Pretending to be the seer makes things really difficult for her, because now she has to show evidence for her claim, but it gets even worse. In the beginning of the game, the TV told everyone that if the real seer ever discovers who the fox is, then the person with the fox role will automatically die on the spot. Now, with 4 people claiming to have the same role card, the real seer is going to investigate the others one by one to prove they're lying, so it's only a matter of time before the fox is discovered. Now, there is one saving grace here that she could do to fix this mistake, but it requires her to be extra sneaky. The way the game works is, each room has a TV inside of it like you can see here, and at night, the real seer turns on the TV where it shows them a list of all of the players. Then, they can select one person per night to discover which role card they have. The thing that nobody is thinking about is that the seer's power all comes down to one simple object, and that's a TV remote. If the seer can't interact with the TV, then he can't discover anyone's identities and his special ability becomes completely useless. If I was in the same situation as the fox here, I would try to cover my tracks by sneaking into everyone's rooms and stealing all the remote controls, starting with the 3 other people who claim to be seers. Then, by hiding them where nobody can ever find them, this one simple tactic completely neutralizes the most powerful player in the game, and the fox is much more likely to win. But as much as I love death games, they're not the only thing that's wonderful about Japanese culture. Kamikoto makes beautiful, high-quality Japanese steel kitchen knives using traditional techniques from Japan. Each blade is crafted using techniques that tap into more than 800 years of traditional ironworking, swordsmithing, and metal casting, and have been honed and perfected by generations of knifesmiths. Kamikoto also only uses steel sourced from mills in Japan. Each knife goes through a rigorous 19-step process that takes several years from start to finish to create unbelievably sharp-edged, single-bevel knives that can cut things like a samurai sword. Kamikoto knives come in this beautiful natural-colored heavy-duty ashwood box, which also makes a great gift for those who enjoy cooking up a storm. This Kamikoto Konpeki knife set includes 1 nakiri vegetable knife, 1 slicing knife, and 1 utility knife. There is also the Kamikoto Santoku blade, which is 7 inches long with a single bevel kataha, among many others. All the blades and the handles have satin finish for a subtle yet stunning luster. They are such high quality, Kamikoto knives are also used by several chefs working at Michelin star restaurants. Everything from presentation to the actual products, Kamikoto really reflects the Japanese spirit and the philosophy of omotenashi, selfless hospitality. I'm really liking the 5-inch utility knife from the Konpeki knife set. It's lightweight and balanced and perfect for more precise cutting. Not going to lie, I'm an amateur, but just holding one of these makes me feel like an iron chef. And of course, it's perfect for all of your how-to-beat needs. You can maintain the edge of your blades with one of Kamikoto's sharpening whetstones. Click the link in the description to take advantage of their big sale and get $50 off any purchase you make with my discount code CINEMA. Thank you Kamikoto for sponsoring this video. Shiki here suggests they split up into 3 groups and explore the building before meeting up for their first voting session. Ayaka's about to leave when she notices her crush flirting with the shy girl and she gets jealous. The fox is head over heels in love with this boy and she'll kill anyone she has to have him all to herself. Exploring the rest of the building, the group opens a sliding door and cautiously walks outside. At the end of the courtyard, they find a giant sign warning them that if they walk past this boundary line that goes all the way around the property, then their collars will go off and they'll die. Escaping is hopeless, and with nowhere else to go, the group decides to explore the rest of the building. Upstairs, they find their names written on a row of doors and go off to check out their own rooms. But as soon as everyone's gone, her friend Tachibana calls her over to talk. In private, the friend asks Ayako what role card she got, and the girl insists that she's the seer. Her friend claims to be a villager, but they both know that they can't trust each other. It turns out that these girls have survived a previous werewolf game together, but this is a new game, and now it's every man and woman for themselves. That night, the first voting session begins, and this kid here accuses Kodai of being the werewolf because earlier he was acting way too sus. Shiki is confident that his accusation is right, but that's when the boy starts to panic, revealing that he's actually the bodyguard. The others think he's just trying to save himself, but another student points out something really important. If Kodai here really is the bodyguard and they vote to kill him, nobody will have protection against the werewolves for the rest of the game. They're running out of time, and with only seconds remaining, the entire group casts their vote. The decision is unanimous, with 11 votes for Kodai and only one single vote for Shiki. Suddenly, the collar around his neck starts to tighten, and it slices his throat open before he collapses to the floor dead. The other players stare in horror as the werewolf game claims its first victim. That's one down, with 11 more students to go. Okay, this is really messed up. 11 students just ganged up on this kid, agreeing that he should die based on zero evidence. That's cold-blooded as hell, but the truth is, he had it coming to him. Kodai made things way more difficult for himself because he revealed he was the bodyguard. Now, it might seem like a good thing to do if you're accused of being the werewolf, but the bodyguard should never reveal their role because they're not allowed to protect themselves. This is a really big deal because as soon as the werewolves find out who the bodyguard is, they can target them for a guaranteed kill during the night. Now, at this point in the game, we don't have very much information about what role cards the other players have, so the only thing we can really use to judge them by is how they're reacting to the situation. Kodai here was being very uncooperative, which drew too much negative attention to himself, and it made him look very suspicious. Despite all of this, if you were in this situation, I guarantee you would be looking for other ways to escape too. But there's a better way to do it that won't get yourself killed in the process. The perfect opportunity for this is to inspect the collars to see how they work. And if you look at how this thing tightens around his neck, you can easily tell there's a tiny motor inside. It takes about 15 kilograms of force to crush someone's trachea, but a device this small would have a very limited wattage, so there might be something we could do to prevent it from closing over his throat. Right before they voted, they had an opportunity to tamper with his collar to try and deactivate it. So if it were me, I would make someone else look in the kitchen here for something to place between the sides of the collar. If they can quickly find something that fits inside this gap, then the force from the collar would be distributed over a wider surface of his neck, and a motor this small won't have enough force to do any damage. Having said that, the game designers might not allow this to happen because it's interfering with their game, and that's exactly why I wouldn't be doing any of this experimenting myself, because if there's a punishment for interfering, I don't want it to fall on me. Now there's one more way to hack this death game, and it's really a shame that these students didn't consider it as an option. We now have one dead player in the game, but his role card is still somewhere on his person. While the rules specifically say that we aren't allowed to show our own cards to anyone, it doesn't say that we can't show another person's card to someone else. If it works, then we can flash the card to someone and they'll instantly die from seeing it. The whole strategy is based on an interpretation of the rules, and that's why I would only use it as a last resort. But if we were about to be voted for execution or murdered by a werewolf later in the game, pulling out someone else's card and showing it to the other players could be the perfect Hail Mary tactic to get out of an impossible situation. Later that night, Tachibana here is looking through the kitchen for a weapon and pulls out a knife from the drawer. She's one of the 3 werewolves in the game, but the other 2 wolves are late. That's when this boy walks into the kitchen and reveals he's the second werewolf, but the last one still hasn't shown up. The girl asks him if the student that was executed could have been the 3rd werewolf, but Kentaro here doesn't think so. Whoever the last wolf is must be hiding themselves to let the other wolves do all the dirty work. It's a very clever strategy, but the girl doesn't realize that Kentaro knows more than he's letting on. Moving upstairs, they sneak through the hallway as they talk about who they should kill. The boy explains they should go after whoever is most likely to be the seer, because if the bodyguard is still alive, he won't know which of the 4 self-proclaimed seers to protect. They decide to take down Shiki, because he made the most convincing claim of being the real seer, but that's when the second wolf here does something sneaky and insists that the girl should be the one to kill the victim. Annoyed, she takes a knife and agrees, but only if he kills her next victim tomorrow. Moving in, they swing open the door, and the boy inside screams in horror as the girl runs up to stab him. The villager defends himself and manages to throw her to the ground, but as he's about to attack her, his collar activates and the boy collapses to the floor. The girl picks up a chair to brutally finish him off, and that's 2 down with 10 more students to go. Okay, this girl is a cold-blooded savage and had absolutely no hesitation stomping this boy's life out. But if you look at the situation more closely, you'll realize that just about everyone here made a series of dumb mistakes. First of all, these werewolves are making way too much noise. If any of the villagers are awake and listening, they could easily hear them through the door and identify exactly who they are by recognizing their voices. These guys are total idiots for talking about who they're going to kill in the hallway instead of the kitchen. That's the whole point of meeting up there in the first place. The next stupid mistake of the night belongs to the victim, Shiki, because if it were me, I would have done everything I could to prevent these werewolves from getting into the room at all. If you look here, you'll notice that these doors swing inwards, and that means you could barricade it with the items inside of the room. If we line up the furniture across the floor from wall to wall, it would be impossible for the werewolves to push open the door, and they would have to skip to the next room. Now, the last idiot mistake of the night belongs to Tachibana here. Even though this girl has ice in her veins, she still let herself get completely manipulated by her fellow werewolf. Kentaro convinced her to kill the villager, but he also stood back and casually watched her struggle to fight off the victim alone. This guy is more interested in using the other werewolves to his advantage than trying to win as a team. This is my kind of player, but that makes him extremely dangerous because he'll throw you under the bus to get what he wants. Tachibana should have immediately recognized his suspicious behavior, and the fact that she decided to trust this guy is going to cost her everything. The next day, the group is shocked to discover the murdered student's body inside his room. It's horrifying, and it's too much for this girl to handle. Nervous, the players go downstairs to discuss what they should do next, when the nerdy student Joe comes running down. As one of the claimed seers, he wants to tell everyone about the role he discovered, but the skater boy Riki tells him to wait. He thinks all the seers should share their information at the exact same time to see if there are any contradictions between them. It's a very clever plan to find out who might be lying, and on the count of 3, they all reveal who they picked. The fox claims her crush Yosuke is a villager. The werewolf Kentaro claims this girl Miri as a villager, but the nerdy student is pointing towards the bedrooms. When asked about this, Joe here explains that he checked the victim's identity last night, but since the person he chose died, that must mean the player was actually the fox. Just like the rules state, if a seer discovers the role of the fox, then whoever has the fox card will die, and it proves he's the real seer. Nobody believes him, and the skater boy asks if this is true, then who did the werewolves attack? Catching the nerd by surprise, Joe here gets upset and changes the subject by accusing the other 2 seers of being werewolves, but that was this kid's biggest mistake. Turning against him, Kentaro here suggests the nerdy kid is the real wolf and is trying to pass as a seer to cover his tracks. The real werewolf has just turned this player into the biggest suspect in a single move, and it's a stroke of genius. But by the end of the game, he's going to pay for this with his life. Okay, this is why stupid people shouldn't open their mouths in a werewolf game. This guy's whole narrative collapsed as soon as his accusation was turned back on him, because everything he said is exactly what a werewolf would say. He stepped too far out into the spotlight, and this ridiculous performance will eventually get him killed. Now, with all this drama here, it's easy to be distracted from some really important information. There are still 2 other people claiming to be seers, and we can learn a lot from whose identities that they decided to reveal. The fox pointed to her crush Yosuke, and the wolf pointed to this girl Miri. Neither of these players have drawn any attention to themselves to deserve being scrutinized, and it seems like a wasted opportunity to reveal players who are much more suspicious. As a seer, your goal is to identify who's most likely to be the werewolf and reveal them. But the fact that these 2 players were chosen tells us that these decisions were not made with this objective in mind. The fox chose this guy because she's head over heels in love with him, and that makes this one of her biggest mistakes in the game. She's mentioned being crazy in love to her friends Ozawa and Tachibana on 2 separate occasions, and the girls were shocked that she would talk about love at a time like this. If they figure out that this is the kid she's in love with, they're going to realize that Ayaka here is being completely biased, and they won't be able to trust her as a real seer. This fox is sipping way too hard right now and has no idea of the danger she's putting herself in. That night the second voting session begins, and this girl Mary decides to speak up for the first time. She suggests that they shouldn't vote to execute any of the seers yet because they still don't know which of them is telling the truth. The others aren't convinced, but she reminds them that once the seers make another prediction, the group might be able to find out who's a werewolf. It makes sense, but the girl has an ulterior motive. Since the seers claim that her and the other boy are both villagers, she suggests they should have immunity from the voting tonight. The players agree with her logic and decide to find someone else to vote on, but the fox Ayaka has just found her chance to get some revenge. This girl has been jealous of Anna here ever since she saw her talking to her crush, and now she's gonna f this game right up. She tells everyone that she's suspicious of Anna here because she's been quiet for the whole game and thinks she might be a wolf. This terrifies the shy girl, and Anna tells them she's only being quiet because she's trying to understand the game. Yosuke here stands up for her, saying that he should also be suspected for being quiet, but the girl points out she's already revealed him as a villager. The boy has an alibi for his innocence, but the girl doesn't. Breaking down, Anna insists she's just a villager, but with time running out, the group needs to make a decision. 5 people vote for the shy girl, 1 person votes for the skater boy, 1 person votes for the werewolf, 1 person votes for Kentaro, the other werewolf, and 2 people vote for Joe, the nerdy student. With that, the shy girl's collar tightens around her neck, and the players look on in horror as she becomes the 3rd victim of this game. That's 3 down, with 9 more students to go. Okay, Ayaka here is a complete lunatic. She's turning this death game into her own private soap opera, all because she can't keep her emotions in check. Look at her face here. She's loving that she can get some sweet revenge, when all Anna did was have a casual conversation with this guy. Normally this wouldn't be such a big deal, but when you're in a death game with a bunch of high schoolers like this, petty drama can get you murdered if you're not being careful. And frankly, it scares the shit out of me. Imagine if you took Lindsay Lohan and the Mean Girls and you put them all in a death game to hash it out. It would be the most brutal thing you've ever seen. Now, what's hilarious is that as the fox, this girl can only survive by being the sole winner. That means if she wants to live, she'll have to kill her crush. And if her crush wins the game, then she must die. Ayaka here literally has 0 chances at a relationship with this boy, but she's in so much denial that she can't even see the death game for what it is. At midnight, the werewolves meet up in the kitchen, and Tachibana here is anxious that the 3rd werewolf still hasn't shown up. She asks the boy if the girl that died earlier could be the other wolf, but he says he doesn't know. The 2 wolves decide they'll target the skater boy as their next victim and wait outside his door. When they open it, the player inside backs away from his desk and screams in terror, but the werewolves are being cautious and don't go in yet. Suddenly, they hear a window open and realize the player is trying to escape. Running inside, they look out the window to find him escaping off the property, but his collar activates and kills him on the spot. It's his punishment for stepping outside the boundary line, making that 4 down with 8 more students to go. The werewolves are about to head back to their rooms, but that's when the girl has an idea. Only the werewolves' doors open at night, so she suggests testing the locks in every room because they should be able to open the 3rd wolf's door. Testing them one by one, she checks all the doors to find them locked, except for this one, which Kentaro checks for himself. He says that the 3rd wolf has already died, but she never considers that he's manipulating her for the 2nd time. Okay, running away from the werewolves seems like it should be the right decision, but it was probably the worst thing he could have done. The rules say that the villagers can't leave their rooms at night, and jumping out the window is no exception, but this wasn't his biggest mistake. This kid took a leadership position from the very beginning of the game, and that's what got him killed. He interfered with the werewolves' plans by tricking the players into making contradicting claims, and this helped expose the werewolves hidden among them. It's important to try and figure out who the wolves are, but the skater put himself in too much of the spotlight, and that's a surefire way of getting murdered. Now this reveals a very important overall strategy for any role in the werewolf game. You don't want to be too outspoken because you'll get targeted, but if you're too quiet like Anna was, you'll end up looking suspicious. The goal is to strike the perfect balance between being influential and not drawing any attention to yourself. Now as for the werewolves, they missed out on a golden opportunity here. The game killed the skater because he broke the rules, and that's a technicality that they should absolutely be taken advantage of, because it might mean that the werewolves still get to kill someone if they play their cards right. Before the boy threw himself out the window, the skater reminded the wolves that they can still choose another door to open as long as they don't step in his room. This information is gold, because if they hadn't entered the room, then this kid's death might not have actually counted as an official werewolf kill. The wolves should already know that the game will kill any villagers who break the rules, because on the first night when Shiki tried to fight back, he broke the rules by harming another player and was immediately killed by his collar. Since they didn't technically kill anyone yet, I would have taken advantage of this by testing all the other doors first to see if we could open any. If we can, then it might mean we can get rid of 2 villagers in a single night instead of just 1. Now there's one more extremely important detail here that you missed. When the werewolves opened the door, the skater boy was sitting at his desk instead of sleeping in bed. One compelling reason he would be working this late at night is because he might have a special role. For example, the medium, and he's trying to map out information to discover who the werewolves are. Now if you look back, this skater was very suspicious of the nerdy kid Joe because he claimed that the first dead victim was the fox. Since the medium lets you see if a dead player is a werewolf or not, this claim must be exactly what he was investigating here. Now, what's absolutely hilarious is that since the medium just died, there's nobody left to contradict Joe as a fake seer or confirm that Ayaka is the fox. Both Ayaka and Joe benefit from this kill more than anybody else, and that makes the rest of this game an absolute nightmare scenario. The next morning, the group looks out the window to find the skater's corpse lying outside the building. They all head downstairs together to discuss what they should do, but that's when Kentaro here stops in his tracks and turns around. He tells everyone that as a seer, he's discovered that Ayaka is a werewolf, and it takes her completely by surprise. The girl tries to defend herself, but she's absolutely speechless. Kentaro demands she confess the truth, but without thinking she changes her story and claims that she was actually the medium all along. Ayaka explains she thought the bodyguard wouldn't protect the medium, so she pretended to be the seer to survive. Her crush is skeptical and thinks the real medium might have died already, but the nerdy kid disagrees, explaining that with 8 players left, the medium is much more likely to be alive. That's when Joe delivers his knockout punch and claims that as the seer, he discovered that Tachibana is the real werewolf, and the girl is horrified because he's absolutely right. The players gather in another room, and Tachibana here insists she's innocent, telling the group that Ayaka must be the werewolf. The other players don't know who to believe, but together they come up with a brilliant idea. The group decides to tie all the suspects to their bed and lock them in their rooms until morning. If someone still dies, then there must be another werewolf, but Kentaro argues that it's not fair. If they're tied to their beds all night, then they won't be able to defend themselves against the real werewolves. His objections only make him look more guilty, and the 3 suspects have no choice but to accept the deal. As the players leave, Ayaka and her friend stay behind, knowing that they're both keeping secrets from each other and that this game is about to turn into a bloodbath. Okay, Ayaka did not play this situation well at all, because changing your claim about what role you have is a dead giveaway that you're a liar. She literally had to pause and think about what to say, and that makes her an easy target for everyone to kill in the next vote. Having said that, this fox has so much plot armor, it's ridiculous, and nobody spoke out to contradict her about being the medium because the real medium is dead. She also got help from the nerdy kid Joe because he points out that with only 4 players dead and 8 still living, it's much more likely that she's telling the truth. That night at the 3rd voting session, Kentaro here tries to convince the group that the real medium is dead and that Ayaka is a werewolf. This kid Yosuke thinks he might be telling the truth since Ayaka already admitted to lying about being the seer, but then things get out of control. Joe the nerd confronts Kentaro, accusing him of being a fake seer, and the two get into a fight. This kid just can't let it go, but as everyone is distracted in the commotion, Ayaka realizes that it's past 8 o'clock and yells that they're out of time to vote. Suddenly, everyone's collars start to tighten around their necks, and the players choke in complete agony. They're all going to die if they don't do something fast, so the group desperately casts their votes. That's 5 votes for the second werewolf, 1 vote for the fox, 1 vote for her crush, and 1 vote for the nerdy student. Everyone's collar finally loosens except for Kentaro here, who's been voted for execution. Furious, he crawls into this girl for betraying him, but she pushes him off as he becomes another victim of the game. That's 5 down, with 7 more students to go. Later that night, the group ties up the suspected werewolf Tachibana along with the fox and her friend Ozawa. They hope to narrow down the suspects and confirm who among them is a werewolf, but the whole strategy is about to backfire in the most unexpected way. During the night, Tachibana here tries to get out of her hand ties, but then she notices that beneath her pillow is a knife. The 3rd werewolf is still alive and left it for her to escape. Cutting herself loose, she barges into Ozawa's room and demands to know if she's the last werewolf. The girl is terrified and denies it, but the wolf doesn't believe her and checks under the player's bed for any weapons. She doesn't find any, which means she's just a villager, but now the girl knows too much and the wolf has no choice but to kill her. Tachibana attacks her with the knife, but Ozawa kicks her away, leaving a massive cut on the werewolf's cheek. It's a death sentence, and there's no way for her to hide it from the other players. Furious, she brutally stabs the girl to death, and that's 6 down with 6 more students to go. Okay, this girl just made a fatal mistake, but this must be why every slasher villain wears a face mask. As a werewolf, it's dangerous to be attacking these people every night, and it explains why Kentaro tricked her into killing the first victim. With a villager like Shiki, it was too easy to get injured, and he didn't want to put himself at risk. Now that Tachibana here has a cut that's impossible to hide, it's a dead giveaway that she's the werewolf. She was supposed to be tied down, and nobody will believe that she got this cut from lying in bed. But with a little bit of luck, there's one opportunity we can exploit that might save our lives. We have to look at every problem like it's a potential solution. And right now what we have to work with is a dead body. I would drag this girl into my bedroom and stage a scene that makes her look like she was the one trying to kill me instead of the other way around. Then we might have a shot at convincing the other players that Ozawa was the werewolf, but that we managed to escape from her hand ties and kill her in self-defense. In this context, all of a sudden the cut on her cheek can be used as circumstantial evidence that works in her favor instead of working against her. It's still a Hail Mary strategy, but as long as we can keep all the villagers to be unsure of what's true and what's false, we might still have a chance to survive. Later in the restroom, she washes the blood off her face and is frustrated that the players will be able to see her wound. But that's when she hears someone walking towards her. Finally, she gets to meet the third werewolf after all this time, but she's completely shocked to see who it is. The next morning, the fox is woken up with the news that another player was killed last night. She goes to her friend's room to see for herself, and it's shocking. That's when Tachibana walks in, but Ayaka notices the massive cut on her cheek. The girl has no choice but to admit that she's a werewolf and got hurt last night during the murder. The rest of the group arrives and the girl confesses that she's the last wolf in the game, but the fox is still alive. She explains that if they kill her, the fox will automatically win and everyone will die. The nerd insists he already killed the fox Shiki by using his seer abilities, but she tells everyone that he's a f***ing liar. She knows this because she personally killed Shiki on the first night and it had nothing to do with Joe. Later that day, Ayaka here visits the werewolf Tachibana, but the girl accuses her of being the fox. She's figured it out, and the fox finally has to admit that she lied about being a medium. That's when this girl Mary suddenly appears in the doorway and reveals that she's the third werewolf. She had been hiding this whole time, and explains that the other wolf Kentaro approached her, telling her to stay in her room, and Tachibana realizes this must have been why he showed up late on the first night. Mary admits that this is her second game, and the first time she played was with Kentaro the werewolf and Ayaka's crush. She knows that Yosuke has got a thing for her, and that's why he'll take her side when she tells him that Ayaka here is the fox. With both werewolves and her crush Yosuke voting against Ayaka, they'll have a majority vote and she's guaranteed to die. Later, the fox here goes to the roof to ask her crush Yosuke if there's anyone in this game that he cares for. He tells her that Mary is a close friend, with no idea that she's a werewolf. Hearing this, the fox asks if he would still trust Mary if she was lying about someone's role, and he tells her he would. The girl realizes there's nothing she can do to change his mind, and leaves the rooftop with her heart broken. Hopeless, Ayaka walks back to the building, but is surprised to find Tachibana secretly waiting for her downstairs. That's when this girl does something completely unexpected, and tells Ayaka that she wants her to win the game. After what they've been through, she can't continue living with survivor's guilt, and the fox promises that she won't give up. That night, it's time for the final voting session, and all the players already know who they're going to pick. But Ayaka here has a plan that will finally end the game. Pretending to be the medium, she tells the group that the fox is still alive and thinks she knows who it is. Since the nerdy student is believed to be the seer, and her crush is confirmed to be a villager, that means she can only accuse either Mary here or this girl Sayaki of being the fox. Ayaka warns her crush that he's being manipulated by the wolf, and if he blindly follows Mary's advice, he's going to get killed. It's the last thing she'll ever say to him, and the group casts their final vote. 2 people vote for the fox, 1 person votes for Tachibana the werewolf, and 3 people vote for Sayaki the villager, making her the game's next victim. To everyone's surprise, this wolf voted for the villager Sayaki instead of the fox, which saved Ayaka's life and ended the game. Suddenly, the TV turns on, telling them that the fox survived and has won. Everyone's collars start to tighten, and Ayaka can do nothing except watch her friends die before her very eyes. That's 11 down, and the fox is the sole winner of the game. The girl's collar unlocks itself, and she rips it off, finally free to escape. The next day, she sets her cart on fire, mourning the loss of her friends, but having learned an important lesson. It's better to have loved and killed than never to have